James Gunn's Superman was a hit. $125 million domestic, $220 million worldwide, strong reviews, strong audience scores. It did what it needed to do. But now Warner Brothers is doing what studios always do when they get a win. They're misreading the moment. David Zaslav, CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery, called Superman just the first step in a bold 10-year plan for the DC universe. He's already touting Supergirl, Clayface, and the HBO Max series Lanterns. And while that sounds exciting on paper, it's also a little premature. Because the reason Superman worked isn't because it launched a universe, it's because it didn't. Audiences showed up for Superman, not the DCU. They showed up for the character, the legacy, the icon. Superman is part of the holy trinity of superheroes: Superman, Batman, and Spider-Man. These are names that transcend comic book culture. They're woven into American mythology. You don't need to explain who Superman is. You don't need to sell him with a trailer breakdown or a lore explainer. He's Superman. That's the pitch. And that's why Gunn's film succeeded. It didn't rely on franchise baggage. It didn't ask audiences to do homework. It gave them a story about Clark Kent, a kind man with power trying to do good. That's what resonated. That's what sold tickets. But now Warner Brothers is treating this like a franchise win. Zaslav is already talking about a new Justice League, new takes on Batman and Wonder Woman, and a full slate of interconnected stories. It's the same playbook that failed them before, and it's the same mistake Marvel made with Thunderbolts. Thunderbolts had good reviews. It had Florence Pugh, David Harbour, Sebastian Stan, and Julia Louis-Dreyfus, but it bombed. According to Variety, it made just $371 million globally, far below the $425 million it needed to break even. That's a loss of $35 to $40 million. And this wasn't a surprise, because Thunderbolts was built around second-rate characters most casual moviegoers didn't know, didn't care about, and didn't feel compelled to see on the big screen. Marvel tried to sell it as the new Avengers, but the audience simply didn't buy it, because the name doesn't matter if the characters don't connect, and that's the lesson Warner Brothers is about to ignore. They think Superman succeeded because of the DCU, but it succeeded because it was Superman, just like Deadpool and Wolverine succeeded because it was Deadpool 3. Deadpool and Wolverine is now the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time. It made over $1.3 billion globally, and it didn't do that because it was part of the MCU. It did that because it was the return of Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, and the comic-accurate costume, and because it was R-rated. That mattered. That was the promise. That was the payoff. When Disney bought Fox, fans worried that Deadpool 3 would be neutered, that it would be PG-13, sanitized, and shoehorned into the MCU. And then Disney released Once Upon a Deadpool, the PG-13 cut of Deadpool 2. That confirmed the fear. That showed fans exactly what they didn't want. So when Deadpool and Wolverine came out and kept the R rating, brought back Jackman, and leaned into the chaos, fans showed up. Not because it was MCU canon, but because it was Deadpool, because it was Wolverine, because it was what they wanted. Compare that to Captain America: Brave New World. That movie bombed. It made less than Thunderbolts, and it starred Sam Wilson, a character who's been around for years, but never carried a film. The reviews were fine, but fine doesn't sell tickets, especially when the character isn't iconic. And that's the thing. To most moviegoers, Sam Wilson isn't Captain America. Steve Rogers is. That's who they grew up with. That's who they associate with the name. So no matter how good the movie was, it was always going to struggle. That's the pattern. Iconic characters sell. Superman sells. Batman sells. Spider-Man sells. Deadpool sells. Wolverine sells. The rest? They need help. They need context. They need a reason. And that's why Warner Brothers is about to make a mistake. They're looking at Superman and saying the DCU is back, but it's not. The DCU didn't sell the movie. Superman did, just like Man of Steel did in 2013. That movie was controversial. It had mixed reviews, but it still made over $500 million globally because it was Superman, because people showed up for the character. Even Superman Returns, which lost money at the box office, came out during the height of the DVD boom. That movie may have flopped theatrically, but Warner Bros. Probably made a fortune on home video sales. It was released in 2006, right when HD DVD and Blu-ray first hit the market. And Superman Returns was one of the first movies available on those formats, and that mattered. And people forget the context. Superman 4: The Quest for Peace was so bad it killed the franchise. Christopher Reeve passed away in 2004, and to an entire generation of moviegoers, Christopher Reeve was Superman, just like Clayton Moore was the Lone Ranger to a certain generation of people. So when Superman Returns came out, audiences weren't ready to give a new Superman a chance, especially when the film ignored Superman 3 and 4 and positioned itself as a direct sequel to Superman 2. Horror franchises do this all the time: Halloween, Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it always risks confusing the audience. Now let's talk about Man of Steel again. It wasn't supposed to kick off the DCEU. That was Green Lantern in 2011, but Green Lantern bombed so badly, just $219 million worldwide on a $200 million budget, that Warner Brothers scrapped the idea. So when Man of Steel came out in 2013, it wasn't part of a grand plan. It was just a Superman movie, and it worked. It made $668 million globally. It was divisive, sure, but it was a hit financially. And Henry Cavill? He could have been this generation's Christopher Reeve. No one complained about his casting. He looked the part, he carried the role. Even people who didn't love Man of Steel respected the casting. It's like Pierce Brosnan as James Bond. Most fans agree GoldenEye was his best outing, but they still like Brosnan as Bond, even if the other films weren't as strong. Say what you want about Black Adam, but it gave fans hope. Cavill returned to Superman. He posted on Instagram. The crowd went wild. And then 2 months later, James Gunn and Peter Safran pulled the plug. Cavill was out. The DCEU was rebooting. And to make it worse, there were still 4 DCEU movies that were waiting to be released: Shazam! Fury of the Gods, Blue Beetle, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, and The Flash. James Gunn announced a reboot before the old universe was even finished. That's chaos. And it's not new. The DCEU has been messy from the start. Warner Brothers rushed to catch up with Marvel. They fast-tracked Batman v Superman and Justice League. Batman v Superman bombed critically. Then they released the Ultimate Edition on Blu-ray, adding 30 minutes back in. Some fans reappraised it. Others, like me, found it even more bloated. Same with Watchmen. I've seen every cut of Zack Snyder's Watchmen. None of them fixed the pacing. Snyder's style is just heavy. Then came Justice League in 2017. It had the highest opening weekend for a box office bomb ever, a record that stood until Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania came out in 2023. Warner Brothers caved to fan pressure and released the Snyder Cut in 2021. It was a hit on HBO Max. And then they said, we're not continuing the Snyderverse. That fractured the fandom. They were finally on the right track after Justice League bombed. Aquaman came out in 2018 and became their highest grossing DC film ever, $1.15 billion worldwide. But the leadership kept changing. Jeff Johns and John Berg were ousted from DC Studios. Walter Hamada came in. Then James Gunn and Peter Safran took over in 2022. Say what you want about the MCU, but at least Kevin Feige has been steering the ship from the beginning. And now, both Marvel and DC are pushing harder than ever into their shared universe model, and casual audiences are feeling the fatigue. To most people, the MCU ended with Avengers Endgame. That was the payoff. That was the closure. Everything after feels like homework. You want to understand Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness? Watch WandaVision. Want to follow Captain America: Brave New World? Hope you saw The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. It's exhausting. At this point, keeping up with superhero storytelling requires a syllabus. And let's be honest, nobody likes homework. DC is heading down the same path. The new DCU wants to watch not just the theatrical releases, but also streaming shows like Lanterns and Peacemaker, just to follow the story. That's not immersive, it's overwhelming. And that's not how Superman worked. It was a self-contained story with clear stakes and universal themes. You didn't need context, you didn't need homework, you just needed a ticket. That's the model that works now. Audiences crave simplicity. character-driven stories, standalone narratives. Give them what they love, not what you want them to love. Because that's where Warner Brothers keeps slipping, assuming love for the universe translates across every character, every project, every tone. It doesn't. Look at Aquaman. It was greenlit under Jeff Johns and John Berg before Justice League bombed. It came out in 2018 and made $1.15 billion worldwide. Highest grossing DC movie ever. Not because it was part of a universe, because it was a fun, self-contained blockbuster with a lead audiences connected with. Then came more reshuffling. Walter Hamada took over DC, and then James Gunn and Peter Safran in 2022. That's 3 leadership eras in less than 6 years. Say what you want about Marvel, but Kevin Feige has been at the helm since day one. He built the Infinity Saga. He earned audience trust. DC has been chasing Marvel's shadow without ever committing to a clear, stable plan. Now here we are. Gunn's Superman succeeds. The audience shows up, and instead of learning from what made that work, Warner Brothers is sprinting into a shared continuity again. But the appetite is gone. The market's changed. Casual fans want great characters, not spreadsheets. And that's the real warning. Because Superman didn't win because of the DCU. It won because it ignored the DCU. And if Warner Brothers doesn't recognize that, they'll repeat the same mistake all over again. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think audiences are done with cinematic universes, or is there still room for these franchises to evolve without burning people out? Until next time, keep it simple, keep it character-driven, and never mistake brand recognition for emotional investment. Let's hope Hollywood figures that one out.